All righty, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining. Good afternoon, good morning. My name is Maritza Gamboa. I am a talent acquisition, diversity and inclusion program manager at VMware, and I'll be leading our panel today with two amazing engineers, Alexandra and Sam. I'm gonna let them introduce themselves and share a little bit about their roles at VMware.
Okay, well, I'll go ahead first. Hi, everyone. It's great to be here. I'm a software engineer at VMware. I work on the virtual machine monitor team, which is the part of the hypervisor that manages the virtual machines. And basically, I virtualize x86 microarchitecture for a living. And I've been doing this for almost a year and a half right now.
Thank you. Sam?
I'm a staff engineer at VMware, and I've been here since February of 2014. I work out of the Palo Alto office, and I actually had the pleasure of interning with Alexandra's team. So I now work for the platform infrastructure team, and I'd love to talk about that, during the panel.
Fantastic. So to kick it off and give our audience a bit of introduction on yourselves, I'm curious how you all first learned about VMware and what interested you to apply to the company.
Sure. I can actually go first. So my brush with VMware was actually with its software. I remember I used VMware Player in college, and I loved it so much. I tried somehow to get a license key to VMware Workstation, right, which is the paid version. And I remember the first time I booted an Ubuntu VM on my Windows laptop, and that just felt magical. I couldn't believe that something like this was even possible. It kind of allowed me to run all these sorts of experiments on my Linux VM while keeping my laptop functional, which was very crucial because I was doing a lot of weird things. I was messing around with the audio drivers and all these sorts of things, but my coursework never got affected because that was all, fine on the host laptop. So yeah, I think that was my first brush with VMware. And as for applying and interviewing, that was completely accidental. I was in grad school in Carnegie Mellon, and I was days away from accepting, I think, what would have turned out to be a largely hardware-focused internship. And coming from an education background that was predominantly rooted in electrical engineering, I thought, hey, this is my only viable fit. But that week, I happened to have a conversation with a far smarter cousin of mine who couldn't believe that I never followed up with VMware after the first round. And he said that, there's even a part of me that wanted to be a solid software engineer and who was passionate about building systems and infrastructure, then this was the place to be. And it was great because he had been in the industry for far longer than I had been. He truly understood VMware's impact on this industry. And I'm so happy that I listened to him.
That's great. I hope he's on the call right now. He gave him a nice shout out.
Yeah.
And Alexandra, I know you have a great story as well. How did you hear about VMware and make the change?
Well, when I first heard about VMware, same as Sam, I knew about this product called VMware Workstation that allowed me to, or I needed to do something in Linux, and I could install it on a Windows machine or vice versa. But I've only recently become an engineer, so at the time I had no idea what that meant engineering-wise. So I thought, oh, that's just a piece of software. So that was my first contact with VMware. That how I learned about the brand, let's say. But as a possible place to work, that came much later. I'm a track switcher, so I went back to school and to study computer science, and some people there thought that VMware would be a good match for me as a systems student. And there aren't that many core systems companies around, so it was for me, it was like one of the obvious choices for a place to work for a software engineer that's into low-level system stuff.
Great, thank you. And Alexandra, I'm going to stick with you. If there's anyone who's listening right now who might be interviewing, whether it's with VMware or in general, do you have any advice for her?
Yeah, actually I do. And I think I'm actually quite uniquely positioned to give advice about this, having been on both sides of the interviewing and even being in the with like hiring authority, let's say. So right now I'm a super junior software engineer. So I'm on the hired side, let's say. But I used to be in a very different job where I used to hire people, and it's a lot of times you see interviewing as a candidate, you see it as a company's offering a job and you're seeking for a job, right? And it's absolutely not like that. When you're on the company side, you're actually desperate to find people who will match your team. It's actually way more like dating than it is offer and demand thing. It's really something that has to be a match. And so, in particular, for VMware in particular, of course, there's a technical challenge. So you have to be technically prepared for the work you're going to do. So that's very specific questions and very specific knowledge that you will need. For example, for my team, it would have been very, very difficult to pass this interview without knowing anything about operating systems or computer architecture, right? But apart from that, one of the things that I thought was really cool, that I really liked, and I thought set VMware apart from a lot of other companies that interview out there, was that I got to interview with the actual team that I was going to work with. So I didn't interview into a generic pool of software engineers that later on maybe or may not find a match in the team somewhere. I actually got to interview with the actual team, the actual people I was going to work with every day. And that was very important for me, because in the end, that gives you an idea of whether you're going to get along with your team. It gives an idea to your team whether you're going to get along with them. A lot of the success or not of a team has to do with how well people work together. It doesn't mean they have to go and have drinks and be buddies for the rest of their life, but they have to be like very good at working together. And this was one of the things that gave me a lot of confidence when I was in the interview process. That this was going to be good. This was going to be great.
Yeah, and what's great is I'll do a little plug, but that hasn't stopped even during COVID. We may not be able to interview in person, but all the teams can still interview virtually, sort of like this. Sam, do you have any advice?
Yeah, I do. So I think I won't speak too much to my interview because that was 6 years. And I only interviewed for an internship and not a full-time position. I was an intern convert. But I'd like to spend some time speaking about some tangible tips for people who are interested in interviewing for full-time roles. So I've kind of noted them down here. So I'd say one is a don't, which is please don't pad your resume with buzzwords of the day. Trust me when I say that you're going to get found out. And you really end up hurting your chances when you do. Oftentimes when we're discussing, the so-called fate of a candidate we've just interviewed, we show particular appreciation for when their resume says exactly what they did and when they're able to back it up. And on the other hand, when we find out that this resume was like a padded resume, it's very disappointing and you really end up hurting your chances. So I'd say, please don't do that. Two, about the actual interview. You're going to have at least 1 or 2 coding rounds for your on-site. right? So some good tips here, I'd say, don't jump right into the code, even if you think you know the answer. Please ask questions, state your assumptions, clarify what's being asked of you, and talk through your solution. Wait for the interviewers go ahead to write code. I actually have one of my favorite questions is, asking an interviewee to merge a scatter gather array. I just love that question. And when they ask me, hey, is this array sorted? I'm like doing a little dance inside. I'm like, yes, they actually got what I'm going for. So, when you ask the right questions, you're already setting yourself up for success. Keep communicating. It's not a good idea to spend, 10 minutes at the whiteboard without talking out loud. Now, full disclaimer here, as a software engineer, I know that that's what comes naturally. Talking out loud isn't something you do very often. So I'd say it's good to have a few mock interviews under your belt so that this becomes second nature to you. And specifically to my organization, we care very deeply about your systems level knowledge, which is exactly what Alex. I'd say coding is table stakes, but your systems fundamentals and your grasp of systems fundamentals gets you that job. For coding, especially for a technical screen, definitely brush up on linked lists and binary trees. Our interviews are very, very tailored to the role you're applying for and your background, unlike a lot of other companies. So say you're very comfortable with C and you're looking for a position pretty low, low down in the software stack. We'd say, hey, there's this piece of code. Why don't you find out all the mistakes that are in this piece of code? Did we allocate memory incorrectly, or find a synchronization bug, things like that. Of course, if it's C++, then your coding questions will obviously include. You can use STL templates, as much as you'd like. For systems, I'd say synchronization is a crowd favorite. I strongly recommend the Little Book of Semaphores by Downey. It's a fantastic little book. If you can get your hands on it, it really explains core synchronization principles really well. Semaphores, convars, mutexes. When we ask you to implement a reader-writer lock, we're looking for things like starvation. Of course, then there are the system design questions, especially if you're looking for a position even higher up in the software stack. One really nice question that we ask is, say you're an admin and you're managing a cluster of machines for developer use. How do you limit resources to make sure that no particular user hogs resources? How do you handle potential overcommitment, things like that? Or, we also like to see that you have good debuggability. So, how would you find out what the culprit change is, in case, everything goes red on your build, things like that. So just to give you, kind of a spectrum of, all sorts of questions that we ask.
Thank you. And Alexandra, I'm going to go back to you. So you just mentioned that you recently transitioned into tech, which I know was from sales. So I'm curious, it's such a big move. If you have any advice for anyone who might be also trying to make a big career change and just what that transition's been like for you.
Yeah, well, not only advice, a lot of encouragement, actually.
Yes.
Because it's like great thing I've ever done. So best decision I've ever made. So I'll maybe give a little background first. So when I was in high school, I always enjoyed math and science. So I was like, let's say my brain was somewhat like wired for this kind of thing to start with. But when I went to university, at 18 years old, I didn't really know what to study, and I ended up picking economics because it's sort of mathy, and I thought it was like pushing the ball further away. With economics you can do all kinds of things later, and I can decide later, what I want to do. And in my last year at school, so this at that time. We didn't use computers that much. It was like everything was pen and paper. And in my last year at school, I kind of discovered computers, and I was like, oh, this is great. Like they don't work as expected, but I always seem to enjoy fixing what's wrong with them. And I seem to have like some kind of ease with them, and I enjoy messing with them. But I'm about to graduate, so I'm not gonna start again. Like, this is what I should have done, but you know, I'm months away from graduating with a degree. So I graduated and had this career in business development in general, and I was actually doing very well. Like, I kept getting promoted, and I was like traveling all over the world, and I was actually working for a tech company, so I was doing sales and business for I was already in tech sector, but I was on the sales and management and like institutional relations and customers and that kind of side. And I not at all on the engineering side. I was surrounded by engineers, but I didn't do their work. I was like secretly jealous of their work, but I was not doing their work. And that went on for many years, and I ended up in Southeast Asia. So I was living in Southeast Asia, developing the business there and running a company for a subsidiary for the company I was working for, a European company. And I was like kind of comfortable, like really making a good money and quite happy in general. But I always had like in the back of my head, oh, this computer thing. But there's so many online courses now. Maybe I should, you know, try one of those and learn some of that on the side. And so I started asking some friends who were in the business, like, oh, what online course do you recommend for me to learn CS on the side? And until one day, like one of my friends said, oh, why don't you just apply for a master's degree why don't you go to the US and study a master's degree in computer science? And it was just something that had just never even crossed my mind, because I had no background in computer science at all, academic or practical. I was a woman. Even though I know it's not relevant, but it's you know, it didn't seem like the image I had. I was over 40, and I was like, there's no way I can do this at this point in life. But it just hadn't occurred to me. But my friend just had planted this seed that, hey, what if this is a person who's like in this sector? It's like a serial entrepreneur, like just very successful entrepreneur, tech entrepreneur, with you know, went to graduate school in the CS graduate school in the US and all that. And so if he thinks it's possible, well, maybe it is possible. And so I started to see what I needed to do, and I started preparing applications for schools. First I took the GRE test, and I did actually quite well in the math part. So I was like, oh, I still got it, and so that really encouraged me. And then what really encouraged me a lot, like so many people wanted to help me, and you know, because a lot of people who had been, I found out a lot of people had made like changes, and they were really pushing me to do that and helping me in a lot of ways. And so I ended up being accepted at the Carnegie Mellon University, same university Sam went to, and which happens to have like one of the top rated CS programs in the world. And I went there, and so of course I could not turn down that opportunity. Like, this is like a second chance. I was never going to get this again, so I quit my job and went to do that. And it was so hard. It was really hard because you can imagine we were only 35 people in the class, and everybody else in the class were these like really smart 20-year-old kids who could all be my children, and who were like really smarter, faster, like had just came out of studying CS or something like that. So it was very intimidating. But I had I was so lucky. I had a great academic advisor, and also the program provides you with a mentor who was great also, and both from a psychological and technical perspective helped me a lot. And I ended up doing quite well so I graduated with a good grade, and ended up working at a lab at Carnegie Mellon for an extra year after I graduated at a distributed systems lab, and mostly because I wanted to take some more courses also on the side, and then after a year there, the person who would be my mentor at school was working at VMware, and said, "Hey, there's this team at VMware. I think you'd get along so well with them. Why don't you apply for a job here? I think you'd be a great fit." And this was the monitor team, which is actually a very, very intimidating team, because it's the core team that started it all at VMware. They have like these really, really senior rock star software engineers that are like super, super brilliant, and you're like, oh, well, yeah, they're never gonna take me there. But again, it was like my own belief that's in there, and in the end, the interviews went really well, and I'm on this team. I'm delighted to be on this team. Everybody is just so nice, and I love the work. It's technically challenging, but the same as at school, there's like so many people who are always trying to help you, and it's really a question of like the whole time, like my own limitation had been my own belief that I have no place there. I have no place in a master's degree, in a CS degree, because I'm a 40-plus-year-old woman who doesn't have any background. But obviously it's possible. Like I just did it, so probably anybody can do it, you know, if they're so inclined. And of course I had to work harder than everybody else, but that's maybe an advantage of being older. Like I'm more resilient and grittier for that. But it's really a thing of people, I think, don't question their beliefs enough. So even now I still do it. Like I have to like force myself to ask, oh, if I can't do something, like why or why not? You know, a lot, like all the time. And you have a lot of a lack of imagination that holds you back a lot of time. And really, like, people who are the women who are listening, I'm assuming a lot of them are already code savvy or engineers, or been through boot camps, or have done work. Like this is stuff that it's not easy. You have to be wired a certain way to do it. And if you've already made it this far, I guess there's not a lot that can stop you. Like I really admire women who did this 20 years ago, or you know, they had to be very imaginative and really not have their beliefs limit them at all, because I mean, we're complaining now about how hard it is, but actually we have it easier than they do. And a lot of what we can do about it is you know, help the next batch make the step, or do the same, and yeah, take away those ideas that they can't do stuff.
That's awesome. I love that story. And so does the audience. You're getting great feedback in the chat. Thank you so much for sharing that. I'm going to turn it over to you, Sam. I know you're working on a really cool project. I won't hog it from the audience, so we'd love to hear more about what you're working on right now.
Yeah. Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. So, you know, I was thinking about what I'd like to leave the audience with today. And, you know, instead of focusing on, you know, hey, this is the coolest project ever, which of course I think it is, or, you know, look at this triple thread, it can sing, it can dance, it can act. which again, I think it is. But I think, what's more useful for this audience is me to take an example of a recent pretty massive endeavor and use it to give you a glimpse into the modus operandi of the cloud platform team. What makes us take the architectural decisions that we take? Because this team, we know that we're unrivaled in the infrastructure footprint that we have. So when we make the big decisions, or the ones, and we'll come to define the product for a long time, we're thinking about hundreds of thousands of customers, and probably actually many, many more, because our platform is used across multiple product lines in the company. So security, which has always been a focus at VMware, was slowly but surely, coming to dominate most of our infrastructure deliverables. And I'm going to talk about one of those in particular today. So let me switch over to the slides now. I promise it won't be long. This will not be death by PowerPoint. Hang on. Okay, let's see here. Do you see my screen? Do you see the? You do?
Yep.
Okay, awesome. So like I said, we were talking about security, and protecting data at rest was actually one of the first problems that we tackled. We were really invested in encrypting VM data and storage data. So that was kind of the first prong that we tackled. And then, of course, data is at its most vulnerable when it's in transit. So we were like, hey, what could we do about that? So we invested in technologies like encrypted vMotion, which guaranteed, the InfoSec triad of confidentiality, integrity, and authenticity of data during, VM live migration. So that was the second prong. And then the third prong was this view-only remote attestation ability in our management plane. I wrote this library that was able to determine whether only trusted binaries had launched on all our hosts in the data center, and it worked. So here's the thing, each of these individual components worked, but we were certainly lacking a cohesive story, something that our customers could really get behind easily, rather than us depending on them to keep track of every new feature that we were coming up with. So I'm sure most of you, listening right now, if not all of you, are kind of familiar with the crossroads that we found ourselves at. Too often, we get so involved solving the problems of the day, or doing everything we can to keep our biggest customers happy. And in fact, particularly in security, where I find that the urgent tends to drown out the important. But then, the dust settles, and then we find ourselves at a point where that sort of ad hoc approach isn't going to cut it anymore. So at VMware, we started, talking a lot about intrinsic security at this point, which is the idea that security in any vSphere or infrastructure environment should be baked into the product at a deep level and not just sprinkled upon. What we needed was a compelling solution that could not just protect customer workloads, not just protect their platforms, but do it in a way that decisively brings all these concepts together. Give our customers a guarantee that trusted workloads could only run on a trusted platform. And it's that sort of thinking that was the start of what we call vSphere Trust Authority. So what does this mean? Well, with vSphere Trust Authority, everything that I just described comes together. You can't have one feature without another. We like to think of this as a foundational solution. I'd say, now workloads, trusted workloads, sensitive workloads are placed on and migrated to only verified infrastructure. And what's more is by leveraging some pretty well-known, widely adopted cryptographic standards, we make sure that verified infrastructure stays that way. This truly is a trusted fabric. So, how did we do this? I'm very happy to answer technical details and architectural decisions, during Q&A. But to summarize really quickly, we used a combination of technologies here. We used something known as remote attestation. TPM 2.0 as a hardware root of trust. Of course, we had to use encryption algorithms, key management, policy-driven authorization. I can go on and on, but I don't have the time. But please ask me questions during Q&A, and I'd be happy to answer. So, how do we develop this further? This is where we are now, but I think one of our primary goals is that we want to make this system very easy to use, desired state driven. We kind of want this to be on by default. This shouldn't have to be opt-in. Our customers shouldn't have to opt into this. So let's see where we are now. This is where we are. This is what the security landscape looks like today. Do you see anything wrong with this picture? Or do you see everything wrong with this picture? And obviously, the security landscape today is a complete mess. And we got here today. But I think what we want to do is move away from this, definitely move away from this, for I think everyone's sanity, and kind of go towards this place where we leverage vSphere Trust holistic security solution. What we want is a system to manage its own security and protect what I think, and I think what all of us would agree, is the most valuable commodity in today's world, which is data. So I hope this gave you, a good glimpse into the kind of problems that we're dealing with as an infrastructure team. And this is just, the most recent of those examples.
Thank you so much, Sam. That was fantastic. All right. So I would love to know now, and in your honest experience, what your favorite thing about working at VMware is. Sam, I don't know if you want to take this first, since you just shared about your great project.
Yeah, sure. So I have lots of favorite things about working here, but I think I can summarize to three. So I think the first is my team. I absolutely love working with them. My manager, he often jokes that our team will come into work even if we're not paid. And I suspect he's right, though I obviously don't want to find out if that's really true, but I suspect he's right, yeah. And I think for me, it's my team, and then my boss, and then my boss's boss, all of them really who just set the culture. One where everyone is treated like adults. We're given complete ownership, irrespective of our title, and that's so crucial. And we're expected to take complete responsibility for our actions. And you think this is pretty obvious, but it's surprising how rare it is in the industry. But I've come to find that at VMware, and it's really great. I also love how everyone makes the time to coach more junior members on the team. I just love that level of selflessness. I myself benefited so much from that, when I just started out here. And so today, I try and pass it forward, because I truly believe that I am who I am, and I am what I am because my team decided to invest in me. So I'm so grateful for that. And I think, secondly, I think the reason I love VMware is I never get bored, which I think for the people who know me well will know that's a huge achievement. And I think that comes with this territory, of working on very difficult infrastructure problems. You kind of get a high working here, because it's this perfect blend of ignorance, because this is still such an unknown, but also confidence in your abilities to solve the unknown. And I just love working on these infrastructure problems, especially because I feel that this layer that we work in, the platform, it's just taken for granted by everyone who runs their apps or their workloads on it. And I love that, because we've got to make it robust. We've got to make it work so well that people who use our stuff don't even notice that it's there. And I think if we do that, we've done our job really well. So I think I just love the space that I'm working on. And finally, and I'd really like to call this out, which is VMware, apart from me being an engineer, which is obviously my time spent in engineering has been great, but VMware has some really nice programs for people who want to try wearing different hats. So I love doing that. I don't like being pigeonholed at all. So we have something called a Take 3 program, which is where you can spend 3 months working, as a full-time employee. You can just quit your current team, for those 3 months and work with literally any team that you want. I think in the fall of 2018, I chose to spend those 3 months working with the product management team, despite being an engineer. And it was eye-opening. I loved that experience. It was so different. My day-to-day was different. The way we built roadmaps and the way we thought about our product vision was so different. And when I came back to engineering after those 3 months, I had become a different engineer. I brought this customer focus with me to every single thing, not just the big and shiny features, but when I solved a bug, I would think of a customer first. When I solved a customer's problem, I would put aside everything else and just work on that, because I had seen firsthand, the pain that they had to go through for some of the things that we just took for granted as engineers. And I think that VMware giving you that kind of flexibility, it's fantastic. So yeah, those are my two things.
I can hear the passion in your voice. It's amazing. Alexandra, what's your favorite thing about VMware?
So I promise I didn't talk with Sam about this before, but a lot of it is sort of the same. So, but it's I'll try to give it a little bit like from my own personal perspective with my own personal team, and maybe from a bit more of let's say a junior perspective. Like Sam is obviously more experienced in the company and as an engineer, but for me coming in, this is my first industry job as a software engineer, right? So it's great to have just such easy access to top-notch people that never look down on you. Quite the contrary, they will pull you into stuff they know you're interested in and just help you along and encourage you to work on it. The management style is very, very much focused on making sure you grow as much as you can, and making sure you get to work on stuff that you like. I get pulled into stuff sometimes by someone. Just 2 weeks ago, one of the most senior engineers on a different team had a bug that he was working on, and he says, "Oh, I remember Alexandra likes this kind of weird thing that's going on here." And so he said, "Hey, do you wanna have a look at this?" And I was working on this thing with him for a whole day, and this is something that's not on my workday goals, or it's not what I'm supposed to be doing all day. But my management, my manager, my manager's manager, and up there, they encourage this kind of behavior. So we're not hack the code as quickly as possible to deliver as soon as possible. No, there's a lot of emphasis on the team building their capabilities and feeling more confident, and being able to feel like they're doing something exciting and important. And as a super junior engineer, I get to work on really core tech. I get to play with great CPUs that aren't even out yet. They're not going to be out until 2 years from now, and I get to mess with them, find things that are wrong with them, make our product work on them. So, this is super important stuff for the company, and they let me work on it, and it's very, very far from the sensation that I get from a lot of colleagues who are in different places. That's one common complaint that I hear, is that they feel like a little cog in a big machine. And here we're in a big machine, but I don't feel like a little cog at all. I feel like I'm an important part of the machine. And I've only been here for a year and a half, but I felt that way very, very fast. And you get thrown into the deep end, but there's people holding on to you, but it's not like, oh, you get to like clean up stuff for a year and do these like minor things. You get to do like exciting stuff, and you get thrown into exciting work. And there's a lot of people, and people are very humble. Like you will have routinely people who've been doing this for like 20 years ask questions and like, hey, I know the answer to that question because I learned that at school, and they forgot or something. And so they have no, like, they have absolutely no shame or embarrassment in asking something that everybody might suppose that they know. And like this kind of attitude is just such a great environment to be working in.
That's great. I can feel your passion as well. I thought I got so lucky to have you both on our panel today. So I do want to be cognizant of time. I believe we're getting kicked off right at 2:50 Eastern Standard Time. So I'm going to ask you both one more question, and then we'll turn it over to Q&A. So I get asked all the time, how do I get a mentor? So I'm curious, Sam, if you wouldn't mind sharing if you've had any mentoring experiences and any advice on this topic.
Yeah, I actually, this is something where I'm very, very enthusiastic about answering, because I've gone through a mindset change in the last 5 years. Like I've actually seen my opinions change on this. So I'm very, very happy to answer this question. So, I know you asked, how can I get a mentor is something that a lot of people think, or especially women think about, right? And I have actually experienced been a mentor to many people. But before I speak about that, I'd like to talk about, what I call the prerequisites for a great mentoring, for a useful and beneficial mentoring relationship. So when I say prerequisites, what I mean to say is, I think you first need to do the work, and you need to be good. And that's fundamental, nothing can substitute that. And once you do that, I'd strongly suggest bring your whole self to work. That really helps, because pretty soon, if you put in the work and people can see you for who you are, and if you're good and with a good track record that builds up over a few months, you're going to get noticed at any reasonable place anyway. And people are going to want to invest in you. If you're really good, guess what? They'll look good too, having invested in you. Which brings me to my next point, which is a mentor is not a godfather. You got to move away from that mindset. It's absolutely not a single person who looks out for you constantly or who's making sure you're okay, right? It's not that. But in fact, I'd say, I've just been in this industry for 6 years, but I already have so many mentors, or so many people rather, I consider mentors. Some of them invested in my technical learning. Some of them did something very simple, but very crucial, which is I had this one engineer in my team who for 2 years made sure to review any piece of code that I put out for review. And it's something so simple, but it's so useful, because, just paying attention to those code reviews and paying attention to, how he would make design decisions made me a better engineer. And then there are some who focused on just helping me communicate better at work, something that becomes even more useful, the longer you spend in this industry. And I've had a couple who've not just been mentors, but they've been sponsors. For example, the woman who actually nominated me to speak today, I consider her that. So it's never going to be one person, and it can come in unexpected ways, but you got to keep your eyes and ears open. At the same time, it's not just a passive process, right? I don't want to give off that impression either. You shouldn't ask someone to be your mentor, because I think it's awkward, of course, and it's a little selfish. I think oftentimes we tend to forget that mentoring is a two-way street. Mentors benefit too from your fresh set of ideas, your perspectives, learning from your work, or having you participate in projects that are important to them. So it's a relationship that builds over time, like any other good relationship is. And I think all the people who I consider mentors today invested in me because they saw potential. And I haven't outright asked them to be my mentor. And, I started off this conversation by saying, do the work. And this is another example, which is, you got to respect your mentor's time. It's perfectly normal and perfectly okay. And I encourage you to ask for a chat or a coffee. If you have someone that you really respect and you really admire, I've done it, even if I've never spoken to them before, I've just sent an email and said, hey, I'd really love to talk to you about, but then here's the catch. I say, exactly about what? I just don't ask them for thoughts or a chat. I kind of set out an agenda. And I think that really helps them too, because then they know that I'm serious about learning from them. So I think, going into a conversation without a set of questions or a clear agenda is definitely a huge turnoff. I think definitely keep your eyes and ears open, take all the help that you can get. And remember that at different stages of your career, you're just going to have people investing in you, for different facets. Yeah.
That's great. Great advice. Wow. Alexandra, we'd love to hear your thoughts on mentorship as well.
Oh, actually, I agree with a lot of what Sam said. And from my particular trajectory, I was very lucky to have really good mentorship along the way. As Sam said, it's not somebody you ask, oh, could you please be my mentor? It's really people you start helping you, and they somehow become your mentor, because every time you're in a situation where you're not quite sure what you would do, you think, oh, what would this person do, or what would they have done in my situation? Or sometimes maybe the way Sam put it is, it's good to prepare when you're going to talk to them, to have an agenda, like you prepare for a meeting. But oftentimes your problem is that you're not exactly even sure about how to do that. So it's also perfectly valid to go and I've done this a lot. It's like, oh, this is how I'm thinking about it. For example, when I graduated, I didn't know if I was going to be an engineer or if I was going to maybe join a startup, because I had all this business background and a new technical background. And then I was like, oh, what should I do? Or every time I talk to a recruiter, they say, oh, why don't you apply for this technical project management job, because you can enter the company much higher, or things like that. But then you think about it, and you basically have these mentors that you can bounce your ideas off, or even just bounce your thought process. Oh, this is how I'm thinking about it. And they will give you perspective that you hadn't thought about yourself. So they might just give you just some additional input that might help you develop your own thought process. Because in the end, they can show you different paths, but you have to walk it yourself, right? So it's important just to know what's out there and to open your mind. Again, it's a way to help you not limit yourself. What you only know what you know, and a lot of this sometimes comes down to not being given enough examples of, if most of the tech companies had women CEOs, women leaders, women CTOs, more women engineers, nobody would even be having this conversation. This wouldn't be a challenge at all. So we wouldn't even do this. So just being there and being more noisy than as noisy as you can, it makes it all the more, it makes it something normal for the girls that are coming. They grow up in an environment where things look different, and maybe their image of the world is shaped differently.
Fantastic. I think that's a great place to end, and we are at time, so apologize to the crowd for not getting to your session questions. But thank you both so much. And I am told for everyone to follow the link in the chat to the closing Women Who Code keynote speaker. And otherwise, I hope you have a great Friday and rest of your weekend. And thank you so much.
Thanks.
Bye.